In this week's episode, we're going to take a look at the most common problems that an admin might have in Microsoft 365. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how to fix them. So stay tuned and you're going to learn something. Hi everyone, Andy here, Microsoft MVP. So nice to see you and thanks so much for visiting my channel. On today's episode, I thought I would take a look at some of the most common support questions that I get asked, which become part of Microsoft 365. And I'm sure it's not an exhaustive list and there will be things that you would like to add on there. And if there are, by the way, if you think that, hey, you know, that would have been a good thing to add, then just pop it down below in the comments and I will add it to my next one for you. How's that? Okay, we're going to talk about network issues, we're going to talk about email issues and so much more. Now, if you've not subscribed to the channel, we love subscribers. So bump the subscribe button, ring the bell, and you won't miss out on the good stuff in the future. And if you enjoy the video, then we love a big thumbs up. So go ahead, bump the like button. It really does make a difference. So without any more jibber jabber, I think it's about time we jump in and take a look at these demos. Enjoy. Now, you know what they say, there's no help like self-help. And one of the things that your users can use to install is something called the Microsoft Support and Recovery Assistant. This is fantastic at helping you solve the most common kind of problems in Microsoft Office from an end user perspective. Now, the only downside of it, as you can see here, it supports all of the different versions of Microsoft Office. Unfortunately, you can only install it on a PC. However, that said, there is also an online version that you can use, which is really nice. So this tells you about the Support and Recovery Assistant, and it also provides the same kind of help for the different scenarios. And as you can see here, we have the most common scenario problems. So things like problems with maybe Outlook is crashing or it won't connect to your Microsoft 365 account, or if you need help in setting up Teams, or there's also some advanced diagnostics tools that you can use as well. Now, typically these, the advanced diagnostics are typically to do with connectivity. And one of the most common connection problems is obviously DNS. So make sure that you've got your DNS records correct. Now, in a previous video, I actually did a session on DNS for Microsoft 365. And if you've not seen that video, then I'll go ahead and I'll post that here. So just to show you that although if you're a Mac user or if you're using an iPad or a phone or something like that, don't worry, because you still do have access to the Support and Recovery Assistant. So that's really, really useful. So some of the most common issues that we have here, you can actually solve simply by making sure that you're set up correctly. So obviously, if I go into settings here, and if I go into my domains, I just mentioned DNS, and you can see that I've got a domain that's starting to be set up here. It's called bobsboats.com. I've not finished it. So just to say that one of the first things that you need to do if you're verifying your actual domain. Now, if you don't want this domain, if you're quite happy with using a tenant on Microsoft.com, then that's absolutely fine. But if you want to have a real domain name, then what you'll need to do is add this record, TXT record, to your DNS. Now, the nice thing about it is if I go and verify that, I'm obviously going to get an error message because at the moment I've not gone ahead and added that. But the nice thing is it's showing you what the record is that's expected. All right. So it's telling you exactly the name of the record, the value of the record, and also the time to live for the record as well. So once you've added that into your DNS, then you can verify again, and this will be fine. Now, in addition, there are also some records for the various applications. And once you've gone through this stage, you'll need to add those records in for the various services. So things like MX records for the Microsoft Exchange Online, a CNAME or alias record that will point to autodiscover.outlook.com. And this is the record that configures Outlook. So this is the magic record. I'm going to do a dedicated session on troubleshooting Outlook in the not too distant future. So definitely watch out for that. All right. Now, just to mention one cool thing here, what if you say, Andy, I don't have access to DNS. Is there another option? Well, there is actually. Many people out there might not have access to an actual DNS server because it's hosted by their ISP, or you've got a website, let's say it's on GoDaddy or something like that. Well, in that case, what you can do, you can actually add the TXT record, you can download the TXT record, and all you need to do is upload it onto your website. And again, go through the verification process and it will work fine. And what that will then mean is when you go into your users, once you've uploaded that, you can then go into your users. So for example, here is Alex. I can go into Alex's account and you can actually change this username here. And you can see it's using Alex at tenant.onmicrosoft.com. So I can go in and I can change that, and I could use my new updated DNS record, and that can solve a lot of problems. Now, just one piece of advice I would say, if you have an administrator account, now you might have a number of administrator accounts, but I would say keep at least one account on the tenant.onmicrosoft.com. Because this can be very, very useful for troubleshooting. So as well as setup and DNS and so on, there are also some other areas where you can prevent potential problems from coming up. So if I go into my settings page here, I'm going to go into organizational settings, and there are definitely a few things here that you want to be aware of. So if I scroll down, you can see that I've got various options for the various pieces of software here. And there are a number of settings that will really help you. So for example, here in Microsoft 365 groups, you can decide a couple of things which are pretty important. Let group owners add people outside of your organization to Microsoft groups as guests. Now, of course, this is assuming that you want guests, of course. Also, let guest group members access group content. Now, do remember that groups are also teams and teams are groups. And if you've not seen any of my teams and groups video, again, I'll make a link to that in the description below. The other thing that we also have here is occasionally users will create groups without owners. And this can cause problems, especially if somebody leaves the organization and so on. So what you can do here is you can take ownership of those groups, and you can essentially create a configuration policy. And the configuration policy will basically say, okay, which users will receive notification that there's no groups. So you can either assign specific users, you can allow only certain users, you can block users, and so on. You can also notify the number of specific users. So for example, you might only want to notify a few users. And again, how often do you want to notify the user? So you might then say, okay, who is the owner of the group? So for example, there could be a sender in the group here. So for example, I could say mod, and I could say that I wanted mod to be the sender, or let's say in this case, let's say Alex. I've got a user called Alex here, and I'm going to say, okay, I can create a little message here. You're receiving an email because you've been set up as a group owner. So worst case scenario, if there is no owner in the group, I can go ahead and I can assign this user as an owner, and he will be notified. And this is a really nice feature, by the way. Okay, so that's the first thing there. So groups is kind of super, super important. On the subject of passwords, we have a feature here called self-service password reset. And this essentially allows users to set their own passwords up. And you can see that you can't really do this here. And in fact, if I click onto this, it will take me through to the Azure Active Directory portal. And again, I can enable this for all of my users or just selected users. So allowing users to reset their own password can be extremely time-saving. And so typically what we'll do here is we have a group here called the SSPR Security Users Group. And essentially any users that you want to be able to reset their own passwords, you can basically just add them, as I say, to this group. Now, please note, by the way, that if you've got users just purely in the cloud, then this is an absolutely free feature. However, if you're using Azure AD Connect, you'd need to set up password writeback. So on the subject of settings, there are just some critical organization settings that you simply just have to get right. So I've come in here into organizational settings in 365, and the first one is if I click onto sharing. Now, I've covered sharing previously in a number of my videos, and again, if you've not seen that, definitely go and check that out. But this is one critical setting that you must need to think about. Let users add guests to their organization. So if you don't want users to be able to add guests, now this doesn't stop owners. So owners can still add guests. But again, this prevents users. And of course, guests could potentially also be users here. So really important that you get that right. Okay. Now, the other thing that's here as well is something called the privacy profile. So privacy is absolutely critical, especially in today's compliance-led world. So if you have a compliance officer you've got a privacy statement, this is where you can actually go ahead and you can set that up and you can put the privacy officer's details in there. The other thing that we've mentioned previously is a password expiration policy. Again, a password expiration policy can be done in Azure Active Directory. So in Azure AD, I would simply come down here into security, and into security here, we would have authentication methods. And in authentication methods, this is where you've got your password protection policy. So this is where you can set a custom smart lockout policy, which prevents obviously X number of attempts. So if you must use passwords, then again, this is in here for you. Now, the other thing that you can also do here is you can set up any banned passwords. So you can import lists of potential silly passwords like password and 123456 and things like that. In addition, any policies that you have, if you're in hybrid, you can actually extend these policies to your Active Directory on premises. And there is a little article here that tells you how to do it. Essentially, you just need to download a little agent. It's pretty simple, actually. As I've said previously, though, you definitely want to kind of configure MFA. So multi-factor authentication is definitely the way to go here. And this is where you can deploy increasing number actually, of authentication methods. And do remember that pretty soon, multi-factor authentication is going to be mandatory in Microsoft 365. So this, as I said, passwords is a really important area here. Just a couple of other really useful things, by the way. If I go into the organizational profile here, of course, you can put your organizational detail. And as this session is on support, you can also, if you're using, for example, a third-party support platform, and you've got some kind of ticketing platform, then of course you can link that and add that into here. So this is how you can integrate your third-party platform there. So the final thing here is the help desk, and the help desk is particularly useful, especially if you're a Microsoft partner or you support other customers. So instead of the customer contacting Microsoft, they will essentially call you, and you can swoop in as their superhero and fix the problem. Now, we've already discussed setting up DNS for Microsoft Outlook. So you need that autodiscover.outlook.com, which is an alias name, as I've mentioned. Other issues that you can find, which are problematic for users, of course, is mail flow. And you can come in here into Exchange Online in the Admin Center, and we have some really useful tools here. And actually, it's really improving as well. So a very useful kind of troubleshooting tool here is you can do the trace tool. And the trace tool, you can see that we have a number of kind of demo ones here that have been configured. So you can specify who's sending the message, where it's going to. You can do a message trace for X number of days back. And you can also say, okay, show me, has the message been delivered? Has it been pending? Are you looking for a specific message? This can be a wonderful troubleshooting tool, and it would normally let me know if routing is okay and if your DNS is configured correctly. But of course, it could be maybe the user's mail address is just not working. So definitely have a look at this. Now, as well as some of the default queries, of course, you can also create your own queries. You can create your own traces, you can save them, and of course, you can then download those results for future analysis. So the message trace is particularly nice. Now, the other thing that we've got here is you can also create email rules here. Now, if you think about Outlook, of course, you can create, when you receive an email, you can also create rules there. But the difference here is, of course, it affects everyone. So you can see here, you can, for example, enable things like message encryption for your messages. You can apply a custom branding message. You can add disclaimers to specific messages. You might want to, for example, operational reasons, bypass spam filtering. So if you've got a mailbox that you collect potential malware for analysis, you might want to use something like that. You can also filter messages by size as well. So these rules are really, really useful. And the other thing that we have is obviously remote domains. So by default, we can accept messages from, and you can see there's a star there, that means every domain. However, if you want to add a remote domain, so for example, I could call this, let's say, tailspintoys.com, and I could just copy that, and I'll say, yeah, I'm going to call the tailspintoys.com. You can then say, hey, okay, any connectivity between this particular domain, am I going to allow things like out of office messages or internal use only? Am I going to allow automatic replies or automatic forwarding? Are you going to allow delivery reports or NDRs as we call them? Think about NDRs, by the way. A lot of spammers use NDRs. So they will just send an email to anyone at yourcompany.com. And if a non-delivery report comes back, it basically says, hey, this server is alive. And hackers then know that, okay, we can then start sending spam mail to this. So it's really useful. You can also control the text. So you can specify a particular type of format here. And then once you've created that rule, of course, then you're pretty much good to go. For the purpose of this demo, I'm not going to save that. Now, you can also, of course, again, add accepted domains. So, for example, which domains do you want to accept mail from? So, again, you can see that your tenant here, you're accepting there. Now, if you've got on-premises connectors or you want to connect to other organizations, you can, of course, connect to other 365 domains or your organization's email server Or if you're having your email managed by a particular partner, then you can just basically follow this wizard straight through. It's pretty self-explanatory, and there are some great learning content here at docs.microsoft.com to help you to do that. The final thing that you can also do is you can create what we call alert policies. So obviously you can create alerts for specific types of email coming through. So you might have set up things like priority accounts or any messages that have been delayed, or there's issues with delivering a message. So you can set up an alert policy here for that. So essentially what will happen is you can set a notification of how many alerts. So if something happens, then it will send you an alert, and you can then, of course, investigate it. Now, one important aspect of mail flow, actually, you need to come here down into the settings page, and we have a mail flow settings. And if you've not looked at this recently, then you definitely want to go in and have a look at this. Now, if you're using things like disposable email addresses for, let's say, marketing campaigns, this is now on by default. So if you want to switch that off, you can do that. More details you can find out about that here, by the way. Also, things like turn on sending from alias addresses. So are you going to allow your users to use alias addresses? So kind of, secondary email addresses and things like that. Turn on SMTP authentication, absolutely. So SMTP authentication protocol is such an important protocol. And also turn on the use of TLS for your legacy clients. Again, super important, folks, because if you don't, they're basically using legacy authentication. And if they're using legacy authentication, they potentially could bypass multi-factor authentication, and that is a security breach potentially. All right. We also have nice inbuilt storm protection. So this prevents mail bombing, for example. This is really useful. And of course, we also have the feature here to recall messages. So this is a really nice feature of Exchange and Microsoft 365 that we've had for some time, actually. But it's nice to see it here in the Exchange Admin Center. Now, of course, from time to time, everybody needs a little help and support, and even administrators. So for that, you can come in here to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So you can put in a new service request. You can view any service request that you've got. If you're using the lockbox facility that I mentioned last time, then that's here as well. And you can also now contact Microsoft hardware support if your tenant supports it. So putting in a new support request is super simple. First of all, you can just type in, says, I need some help with DNS. Let's say, for example, you're not sure what to do. So essentially what we have here is a bot. This is an AI-driven support, and this will help you support with options that come from Microsoft Tech Community, as well as Microsoft Docs.microsoft.com. However, we do need to contact support from time to time, so you can contact the support and they will actually call you back, or they will email you, text you, whichever you prefer. Also, do remember that we also have the Microsoft 365 admin app that you can download for both your iPhone and also Android, and that can be an invaluable source of support there. So there you have it, just some of the most common issues that you can get with Microsoft 365. Hey, listen, I really hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, hit the like button. It really does make a difference to my channel. And if you've not subscribed, then bump that subscribe button. We'd love to have you on board. Okay, thanks so much, and I'll see you next time around. Thanks. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy, and while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button and you won't miss out.